Welcome to The Lens with me, Sarah Travers. The Lens is a business in the community podcast in partnership with One Young World. I'm delighted to introduce our guests today. They are Richard Sykes, SVP and President of one of the UK and Ireland's largest integrated facility engineering and infrastructure solutions firms, ABM UK and Ireland. And joining Richard, we welcome Manuella Appiah, Environment, Social and Governance Manager for SUNROCK, a leading European developer of integrated clean energy systems, servicing valued customers across the logistical and industrial sectors. Now, in this episode, we'll be discussing making business responsible with people, planet and place. But what does this mean for a business, its clients, and indeed its suppliers? To find out, let's get into the conversation now. Richard, Manuella, welcome to The Lens. And I'm excited to hear your views on responsible leadership and how you believe every business should be pushing the ESG agenda at a time, I suppose, globally when that is very much threatened. So Richard, if we could start with you, I'd love if you could tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you've come to be in your role at ABM. And you might as well just explain what ABM does.
Of course, and Sarah, thank you for having me today. If you look back at my career, I was fortunate enough to be sponsored actually doing my degree of quantity surveying at Kingston University by a company called Taylor Woodrow, who's now Taylor Wimpey, a large house builder. And I went from a graduate to main board with them. And I made the mistake actually of asking our then chief executive whether or not he would invest further in the business I was in or sell it. And he came back to me the next day and said, "Sell it, Richard." So that was my first mistake in a senior position probably. And since then, I moved on to a company called Carillion, who famously collapsed and went into liquidation in Jan 18. I wasn't at fault for that. I left some years earlier in 2012. And I ran, from 2012, I ran ISS's UK and Ireland business before running Western Europe. And then I ran Northern Europe after that and then assumed a transformation role. But my career really has always been around services and people-centric industries. And that's what drew me today to ABM, where I am now. ABM is about people, it's about places, and it's the experience we create when those two really come together. Imagine you fly into an airport. It's probably ABM that cleaned the plane. It'll be ABM that are probably guiding you from the airport. It'll be ABM that's selling you duty free. It'll be ABM that are keeping the lights on, keeping the air conditioning going. And then you get on a tube journey. It'll be ABM that are keeping you safe on that tube journey, cleaning, keeping the lights going. And then you arrive at your destination and say your place of work. It'll probably be our security guard on the door, our guest experience people at reception. We'll probably be doing the cleaning of the offices, and we're making your day comfortable again with the lighting and the air conditioning in that office. So a whole range of a hidden economy that goes into facilities management.
It really is a hidden economy, facilities management. Who knew? And you're behind the scenes. Okay, Richard, I will be coming back to you, but Manuella, you're joining us from the Netherlands today, but tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at work.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for having me on this series. I've lived in the Netherlands for 20 years. I must say my story goes back in Ghana. That is where I grew up in a cocoa farming family. And as a child, I saw something that really stayed with me, and that is the huge gap between the hardworking smallholder farmers planting cocoa and the price of cocoa on the global market. So this really sparked the curiosity in me about how can the economic systems be made more fairer. And when I got the opportunity to start my university degree, I was very much drawn into international human rights law, but with a link of development and trading. So that is why after my study, I started working at a think tank, working on different social and climate justice topics. And from the think tank, I went into policy, working with the Dutch government to help companies, particularly in the extractives and mineral sector, to understand their supply chain. So how do our supply chains look like? Which raw materials do we use in the components? And how are they produced? And which human rights or labor conditions are affected by this production? So I really got the chance to work with different companies through the government and felt through the advice I could support the companies with, they could really improve their due diligence in the supply chain. And after a couple of years, I realized I know quite a lot about the policy, but how does it really work in practice? There's one that is advising companies, the other is really living, let's say, the expectations. And that's what drew me to SUNROCK, because the company It is indeed about supporting our customers with clean energy solutions, including battery solutions, EV charging. Mission and my role in there is that it's not about just about the clean electrons. It's about how are they produced, who is developing our parks, and are they being treated fairly. So my role at the company is really to help us also embed social sustainability into what we do.
And that's what we really need to be thinking about, is it? When we go behind, a bit like what Richard was talking about, the behind the scenes with ABM, we've got to go back. We've got to look at our supply chains too. Richard, just coming back to you and getting into today's topic then. We're talking a lot on this podcast, particularly about responsible business, corporate responsibility, and ESG. And I said in the introduction, that's very much being tested now across the world. But what does all of that mean to you, responsible business? And what do you believe business needs to be doing to push harder?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and you've got to realise now that responsible business is no longer a side project. It's a strategic project. It's a cultural imperative. It has to be at the heart of your strategy and how you go about business. Because nowadays it's explicitly linked to success. We had some research recently, 75% of all employees now want an environmentally friendly workplace. So a responsible business has to move to a nice to have to a non-negotiable if you're going to attract future talent to your organisation. And for us, there's a great deal involved. It includes continually investing in technology that can help you run buildings more efficiently from an energy perspective, ensure you have social value programs in place that benefit the communities we serve and the people that work with us and for us, and ensuring that our suppliers have strong responsible business practices in place as well, so that it goes right through the value chain. But on a daily basis, business needs to ask themselves, how do we keep creating a positive impact for people, the planet and the communities we serve? Because it needs to be part of your culture and it needs to be part of your company's DNA.
And Manuella, I know you've said there you live and breathe ESG, and you've been in both policy and then you're actually out there doing the work now. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah. So for me, ESG or sustainability, and of course a lot of acronyms that go with the work we do, it's not about a checklist. It's really a mindset, and for us, it's also about becoming better, because you are never there, right? It's about continuous improvement. It's about knowing how is my business affecting people. So concretely, one of the ambitions we had before I joined SUNROCK even was, for instance, that even though we are reducing the carbon footprint of our clients, we can also do better in reducing our own footprint. So we set a target to reduce our emissions with 50% by 2030. And I'm really pleased to share that in 2024, we achieved the target already, because we really worked hard together with different departments, particularly the people team. When you rent in new offices, how do we make sure that the heating is done sustainably, the electricity is done sustainably? And by doing this, we really amplify our impact. That is not just, let's say, the parks helping our clients, but that we are also reducing our own carbon footprint. It also means looking into the supply chains, as I mentioned before. We have this idea about radical transparency, about understanding where are all the solar panels coming from, all the mountain systems, the inverters. So many different components go into making the solar system work. Who are producing them? Which raw materials are going into? And one of the key things we've been doing is that as one of the first solar companies to publish our supply chain data on our website to make it accessible to our stakeholders, but also to visit suppliers in China, to visit mines in Peru, for instance, so we can understand, how are the working conditions there and what can we do, even though we are very far away from, let's say, the source of the materials. How can we use our leverage and our, purchasing power to encourage better practices completely up the supply chain? So these are a few examples of how we try to really make ESG tangible and practical, even as a very small company in the grand scheme of things.
You've just mentioned there you're a very small company, but what do you think it means to the people who work for SUNROCK? What does it mean for your suppliers? What does it mean to your customers that you have these standards?
I must say that, first of all, my colleagues, they are very, very proud to work for a company that intrinsically believe in this topic. So whenever I have new colleagues, every quarter I do an ESG intro. And when I share with them how we support ESG topics beyond compliance, they feel really proud to say, oh, well, I'm very happy I joined this company, because many of the examples I give they are not used to in their former workplace. Additionally, we have also suppliers who appreciate the fact that we push them to do better. And it's not just pushing them, it's about collaborating. So I'm not saying that we are going to outsource our responsibility. No, how can we become better together? So working closely with our suppliers and where possible sharing knowledge with them so that they also know how to do their due diligence and improve on this. And we see our customers and, of course, our shareholder also very supportive of what we do, because at the long run, what we all want is really a just energy transition, one that is really fair, and that I think makes the energy transition as good as possible.
Manuella makes a very good point about how employees feel proud of the organisation they work for through sustainability and such like. And when people really understand their purpose of why they come to work. And there is a wider purpose why people come to work, whether or not that's the environmental credentials or the social value piece, where people are putting more back into communities. That's what makes people proud. And when people are proud and understand their purpose, it drives them on in their workplace and they get more enthusiastic about their work. So it's a very good point in Manuella places about getting purpose into your workplace, and people then become proud of what they do.
And Richard, I can hear a sense of pride in your voice, presumably about what it is that you do. But when you are that leader and you really believe your purpose is responsible leadership, how do you balance the ambition for the growth of a company with the need to ensure that that growth is sustainable and inclusive?
Yeah, I don't see it as a balance. I see it more as alignment. So for me, responsible, sustainable growth is a growth strategy. Not only is it morally and ethically the right thing to do, I believe, but additionally, on top of that, our customers in the UK and Ireland demanding it. A larger and larger proportion of our tender scores are now all scored around corporate responsibility. And our role as a trusted partner is not only to help our customers be successful around their sustainability targets as well as our own. So there's a double-edged coin. We are the behind the scenes of most organizations, so we're impacting their environmental and sustainability targets. So we have to be a vital part of it. And for us as a business, we've invested a lot recently, our teams, both with specialists to help us, but also generally across the wider workforce to understand all the ESG credentials we have, the environmental sustainability, the social value piece that we have. And the bit I'm really proud about is the social value, really. And you can get measured either through a national themes, outcomes and measures social value portal, or you can use the BITC guide, which also has a social value measure. And the important thing is that you do measure it. So when you're thinking about success and you're thinking about the growth and sustainability and inclusive growth, measure through those portals. Actually measuring it and having an outcome really helps keep your focus on it to make sure that you do grow in the right way.
Yeah, so measurement is so important, and it was interesting there to hear your perspective in terms of, winning those tender scores with CSR. They matter, as does the social value. So that's very heartening. How do you feel then that ABM helps other organizations in terms maybe of your client sustainability journeys? How do you help your clients reach their responsible business goals?
Yeah, so we help our customers actually measure their sustainability targets. We actually track them for them because we're creating a lot of the carbon potentially for them. We're helping drive energy solutions for our customers, whether or not it's through smart technology or Internet of Things or sensors. We carry out predictive maintenance, as you'd expect. So we actually have quite a large technical piece to play for our customers and helping them achieve their targets. And even in the workplace, making sure that the workplace is engaging, sustainable, smart, welcoming by design. All of those facilities management things really help drive employee engagement in the workplace, not just the environmental credentials of carbon reduction, but actually improve the impact they're having in a workplace and attracting their talent. So those are the kind of things we're kind of looking at, and how we can help customers retain their talent, attract their talent, but also drive down their environmental carbon footprint. And
would you say that people are still at the very heart of what you do?
Absolutely. People are central to everything we do. We're a people business. I'd hate the day when robots take over the world, when, we're getting close to some of that. But the power of the human touch always still exists. We have around 15,000 people now in the UK and Ireland, and their central delivery is around responsible growth. We invest a lot in our people. We make sure they have that purpose that we spoke about earlier, Sarah. And it's really about the social value for me is putting something back into the communities we work in. Because we're working in communities all around the UK and Ireland. And I ensure that, whether or not it's through volunteering, charitable donations or fundraising, that each of our board members take part in that, all the way through to our impact groups, or that's Women at ABM Impact Group or a Rainbow Impact Group or a Disability Impact Group. We really make sure that we connect to the communities we work with to make a difference.
Manuela?
Yeah, so what I wanted to add to what Richard just said is that even, as I mentioned, even though we are a small company, what I realize is, so I'm the only ESG manager in our company. However, we do a lot and we cover a lot of topics across the board. And currently we have about 25 employees working in different ESG working groups to create impact beyond their own work. So for instance, somebody from finance helping us with carbon accounting, not part of his job, but, just to create impact that goes beyond, let's say, the business as usual. The same with people from asset management on circularity. And I think what this really leads to is that ESG doesn't become a side project, but becomes really embedded in the organization because they become ambassadors. They learn to develop strategies around the topics and increases the sense of ownership. And thereby, I believe, that it goes beyond me as, leading this topic in the organization. So I think it's really good when you make, the culture of the companies as such that allows all employees to embrace this topic. Beyond, let's say, what they were, initially employed to do.
Well, that's really heartening because, you can't just be that one person with the ESG label, that tick box exercise. That embedding is so key. Do you believe that's the case too, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. Try and develop people and make people understand the impact they can have in the workplace or actually in their normal place at home as well. It makes a huge impact. So absolutely fundamental, Sarah.
Manuela, you've worked, as you said, within government and you've travelled across many continents working as well. What role do you think that government has to play right now in ESG?
I think there are many good examples of government really taking action to set the stage. I must say, even though ESG, of course, goes back to law, to international human rights law, and the OECD, for instance, has been very active on this topic for decades. But one of the examples I think it's very much worth sharing with our audience is like the Netherlands about 12 years ago decided to support multi-stakeholder agreements between companies, NGOs, trade unions, and the government. And the goal of these agreements is that companies are supported to understand their value chain impact and by working with the NGOs to really take actions, what we call a collective impact project on the ground to improve these negative impacts. And by supporting such systems, first of all, the companies get to better understand, what is expected from us as companies, but also working together with NGOs, strengthen the understanding of what are the social impact on the ground, the NGOs bring in their network, and by facilitating such conversations, what we've seen is that there has been a tremendous increase in understanding of the companies that are part of these multi-stakeholder agreements on different social topics, child labor, forced labor in supply chains. There are many other strategies that could be undertaken by government to support companies that are willing but are unable to, or maybe lack the leverage. Often you don't have the leverage to really require certain labor conditions on the ground. But by working together with your peers, you could increase your leverage and thereby have a stronger voice towards the supplier on working conditions. So I do believe there is a role of governments there.
What impact do you feel that global positioning has on people, planet and place issues? Are decisions made in one country impacting other countries? And if so, then how can companies hold true to their own commitments when it comes to ESG? Richard?
Yeah, well, ABM is actually a US-owned business operating internationally. We do recognise decisions made in one market can have a ripple effect elsewhere. While I don't really want to comment on the US politics specifics, what I can say is that, in the UK and Ireland, in our sector, responsible business is first on the agenda. There's greenwashing or green hushing, as some people are now calling different parts of that. Those trends don't really affect us in the UK and Ireland. I haven't seen any of that too much in our sector, which is good to see. What I will say, though, is with geopolitics being what it is, I think it's essential that you just have clear values, clear responsible business standards that act as a constant. So it empowers your local teams to deliver in a way that's relevant to their communities, their legislation, their social needs. So we have our own legislation here in the UK and I.
Interesting. Manuela?
Yeah, so looking at the globalized economy and maybe coming back to the renewable energy technologies, there is no solar panel that is made without components coming from all over the world, let's say. And it is important that companies, understanding this, also think, okay, how can we influence the production and the working conditions linked to these components? There are, of course, international human rights and international labor standards, which have been developed by the United Nations, the international labor organizations, and almost every country in the world have ratified these fundamental documents, standards. So as a company, you can always ground your policies on these international frameworks and still act ethically, even if the local standards fall short. So there is a responsibility of companies to go beyond local standards that does not meet the minimum threshold set internationally, and use that as a starting point and continue to act responsibly.
We know that economic growth is one of the key drivers for UK businesses right now. And Richard, I know you sit on BITC's Leadership Council. So I'd love to ask you for some advice now that you would give to leaders who want to make responsible business central to their growth strategies. What would you advise in terms of practical steps?
Yeah, I think first start with a clarity of purpose. So, define the impact your business is kind of uniquely positioned to make. If you don't understand the why, you never get to the how. Secondly, I'd say make it measurable. Use the frameworks like the BITC Responsible Business Tracker or the National Social Value Portal to set your targets and hold yourself accountable. That's key. And then third, I would say invest in your people, right? This bit we mentioned earlier about culture, skills, inclusion, well-being. They're the real engines of resilience and long-term performance. And probably the final thing I would add, Sarah, is stay curious and humble. I think responsible leadership is a learning journey. It's not a badge of honour. It's continual improvement and continuous learning going forwards.
I know, Richard, you did say in your introduction that you've kind of been tested at times earlier on in your career with, I don't want to say the word failure because I don't like the word failure, but things not going perhaps on the trajectory that you thought they would be on. So that's, a real test of resilience. And that's the thing with companies and with people. It can be a real test of resilience. Have you any advice there in terms of your own personal experience?
Yeah, I think, I always try and spend as much time with our frontline colleagues as possible, because I think listening on the ground is where you understand where things are really working, really not, both from a social value and environmental perspective. And we just recently finished a roadshow going around the country, talking to as many people, aligning ourselves around the challenges we have, what we could do better, how can we improve our approach to the market, is our strategy working? And then on the back of that, I can see that in my experience, we've had to invest a lot more in green skills and inclusive development, because the skills and confidence and progression, that's what changes lives. And also, probably for me, we need to accelerate our corporate responsibility targets. We need to move from certain pilots to scale those faster and get more ambition so that we can turn into a meaningful delivery around ESG.
Great words there. And I love the fact that you keep coming back to that alignment and investment, accelerate, do better. Manuela, what do you think?
Completely agree. Looking at it from, let's say, supply chain perspective, how do we understand as much as possible? When I look at the construction workers who construct our parks, because even though we invest in solar parks, we don't construct them ourselves. Our colleagues at the office, don't put together solar panels. We have migrant workers coming mostly from Eastern Europe that construct the parks. And one of the things I felt was very important when I joined the company is, do we understand their working conditions? Because they are usually subcontracted workers. And we would like them to be treated as fairly as we are treated by SUNROCK. So we started looking into conducting assessments and talking to them, trying to understand, what are the working conditions, their housing conditions. And it's very important to me, as Richard said, really go into the frontline employees, because they are the ones making our business possible at the long run. So try having dialogue with them, exchanging with them to understand, what are their experience and how can we make it better as much as possible. It's one of the ambitions I have and of the inspirations I get from them as well to transfer, the input we get into our procurement practices, into our operations practices, and make their work also as decent as possible.
Yeah, and always questioning your policies and could we be doing better? I'm hearing that from both of you. At this point in the podcast, I'd love to know if you have any questions you'd like to ask each other. Manuela, have you a question for Richard?
Yeah, I had two questions, if I may, Richard. Yeah, well, I was looking on your website, and I really believe, and I saw you are quite a diverse company. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is really an important topic to me personally as well. I was wondering, what are the challenges that you face in strengthening diversity at the top? Because often you have a very diverse workforce, but it becomes more difficult as you go to the top to get this. So what are the challenges, and what are you taking to overcome this, let's say?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge in terms of diversity and inclusion around, especially the more senior roles in a business, at board level roles. And I'm not saying they're glass ceilings. I think a lot of those have been broken down now, but you need to be proactive in seeking that diversity in the senior positions. And that's exactly what I try and do. And that's what we do at ABM in the UK and I. And it is a challenge, but it's also to make sure that if you're going to recruit for certain positions, that you ensure that if we're using a headhunter or recruitment agency, that you demand that diversity is in the shortlist, right? And that's how it starts. And also to make sure that as soon as that diversity does start to come through your ranks, that you promote that diversity through your organisation. You promote your diverse talent through your organisation. And that's how you get a diversity at the senior level in the end game.
Well, I was thinking, Richard, if you could go back to your younger self during your university days, which topic on responsible business or course would you have followed in retrospect?
That's an interesting one. My son actually is doing chemical engineering. I think that's what he wants to do, his degree. I probably would have swapped my degree for something like chemical engineering, which actually is developing better solutions for the environment than I would have done doing quantity surveying, right? That's not really a focused degree on something that can improve the world. But that's the sort of thing I probably would have followed if I had a second life going backwards.
Well, there you go. That's wonderful. Your son's getting to do it. You can live vicariously through him. Isn't that what they say? So let's switch over. Richard, what would you like to ask of Manuella?
Yeah, Manuella, probably a similar question. If you, let's say, go back, would you have chosen this career or would you have chosen something else?
No, I think this is really the love of my life when it comes to career-wise, because I really love the intersection between, let's say, human rights law, policy, and corporate settings. So I really flourish in that system. So I maybe I wouldn't have maybe focused on other topics, which I did. Studying law, you study all kinds of topics. Maybe I would have chosen more sustainability topics, but when I was studying, there was not even a sustainability program. So you had to just, do law, and eventually sustainability became a topic. So I would have still focused on human rights law, but perhaps broadened it with carbon accounting, environmental sustainability.
I don't think I've ever had a guest before talk about their career as the love of their life, but Richard, talk about purpose. She loves what she does.
Absolutely. It's great to have that passion come through, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I would love to have you on my team, Manuela.
There we go, Manuela. If you ever feel that you need to change, then Richard is there to take that call. Now, on the lens as well, we've been building up a great collection of advice from all of our guests in terms of maybe something they've read, something they've listened to, a report, a piece of research, something that could inspire our listeners to be more responsible. So I would love to ask that of each of you today. Can you recommend something that will help people going forward with their mission to be more responsible? Manuela.
Yeah. So I was thinking of this, and it is an old literature, but it really sticks with me. So I feel, I would like to recommend it to readers, and that is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. And it's really about how human beings became the most influential species on Earth, and particularly with respect to the use of storytelling to create the civilization that we are. I believe that it triggers us into thinking of our future. Where do we want to go as a human being, as a human species? Which values do we consider important? And from a responsible business perspective, I really believe in the power of, let's say, collaboration, compassion, storytelling. And by bringing this together, I think we can really shape our common future for the better. So I would like to, bring these values more into the work we do and encourage others to also adopt them as much as possible so that we can really have environmental stewardship and social justice at the forefront of development.
A fantastic recommendation. I read it before, but I must dig it out again. Richard.
Yeah, probably not half as good as Manuela's, but We did some research recently that basically showed 3/4 of people want their workplace to be more sustainable. They want being in the workplace to be worthwhile. And that means walking into a place of work that understands them, gives them a purpose, and is looking outwards as well as inwards. So that for me has really helped me motivate. How do I look at our business going forwards? How do I look at corporate responsible strategy? And how do we use that to serve our end users?
That's brilliant. Thank you. And the final question, and we ask all of our guests this one also. As responsible leaders, what are you personally committed to doing more of or less of in the coming year?
Yeah, I think for me, again, continue to spend time on my front line, on the ground, understanding what we're doing and what impact we're having, investing more in our green skills and our inclusive development, and also accelerating our corporate responsibility targets. I think it's too easy to put a time frame way down the road, and it's really time to accelerate that now. People start talking about 2040, 2050. Why not talking about 2030? What are we doing by 2035? And really trying to accelerate our ESG credentials going forwards.
Super. Manuela, last question to you.
Yes, so on the personal front, I've reduced buying clothes because the clothing sector has a lot of environmental impact. So I try to repair as much as possible and avoid buying new clothes unless it's necessary. I do know, even though as an individual, every choice we make has an impact on the bigger system. So that is how my small way to try to also reduce the environmental impact of the clothing industry. On, let's say, a professional level, I hope to continue working together with our competitors, our peers, to really improve the social conditions of the renewable energy supply chain. And as the saying goes, if you want to go faster, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And I'm really hoping that we can continue to go together as a renewable energy sector to make our transition even more just.
Oh, lovely. Great way to end this edition of The Lens. My thanks to our two guests today, Richard Sykes, SVP and President of ABM UK and Ireland, and Manuella Appiah, Environment, Social and Governance Manager for SUNROCK. You've been listening to The Lens with me, Sarah Travers, and if your business would like support to be stronger in supporting your people, the planet, or the places in which you're located, then please do visit us at www.bitc.org.uk. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again next time.